So, John, I'm an executive coach, and it's clear that my CEO client lacks the self awareness to recognize his leadership deficiencies are an obstacle to his company's growth. How do I help him get out of his own way?
Yeah. I feel like this might apply to all CEOs, all leaders. I think there's a way to do it. Well, okay. I have a friend who's a CFO, Chief Financial Officer, and we share a lot of ideas back and forth. And I think the main thing is, the main piece of advice is to really put yourself in the position of the CEO and try to imagine what the CEO cares about the most. Like really deeply listen level 2, like go into that and become curious, like and ask, like, what's the biggest challenge right now you're dealing with? What's the biggest frustration? I've settled on, and I know that even in my own journey of, going from, basically a high school Latin teacher to establishing my own practice to running an organization, where like all of those things, like especially running an organization, I've never run one before. So I know I'm going to make mistakes. I know that there's opportunity for me to grow, and I know, like that this needs to get done. I think that there are some leaders and organizations I've worked with, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear, oh, like this is where they need to grow. This is where they need to be different. And that's a challenge. That's a really big challenge. And I have a lot of compassion where that comes from, having run an organization, because it's a little bit like the person in the arena. Like it's easier for people who are not in, running the organization to go, oh, they could do this differently, they could do that differently, they could be like this. Fine. But when you're actually in there running the show, it goes so fast. It's like listening to a coaching session versus being the one who's doing the coaching, who's coaching. Like when you're in a coaching session, it's fast. There's so much material coming at you. There's so many things. If you listen to a recording, you can go, oh, you know what? I could have done this better, could have done that better, could have done this better, could have done that better. So I would challenge whoever's asking the question first, like have the first step in this is to have incredible compassion for the CEO and understand that CEO, the pressure that person is under is immense. It's going to be a lot. And so the CEO is acting in that way for a reason. And most people do the very best they can, given the options that they have. It's not like the CEO is trying to mess it up. So it's compassion. It's going over there and really going level 2 and becoming curious about it. Like getting into their worldview and looking at all of these problems, looking at all of this stuff from the CEO perspective, which is different from an employee perspective. So you have to, like, the first step is really getting over there, getting curious. What's it like? From there, you're going to get insights. And CEOs, one of the most valuable things CEOs recognize is when an employee starts to think like them and realize, okay, like from the CEO perspective, this is what it's like to think like them. Oh my goodness. Oh, that's gold. That's like, yes, thank you. Someone is looking at this from my perspective on it. And it's like, yeah, that's amazing. That's what you want. And I'm so curious, Raj, your take on this too, because I feel like this is a really, really good question.
It is. And I just want to acknowledge what you said as well. You talked about having empathy and compassion, stepping into their shoes. And perhaps there is that piece, as you said, around acknowledgement. You're acknowledging their journey also to this point, and the growth and the celebration. And I think sometimes for individuals, this is a lonely journey, isn't it? At the top to where they have come to or where they've got to. So, I was thinking about some of these pieces. The other thing is you might be helping somebody, a leader in an organization, a CEO, to look at things that they've never looked at before. You know, they've become successful potentially from doing the things versus focusing on what we talk in coaching around the beings, the being pieces, and values and mission. And one of the things that helped me working with senior leaders is helping them and empowering them to remember the why, the vision, the values. It reminds me of a module I did myself with you, John, in the 2.0 program, where we looked at company shared values. And what is the culture that the leader wants to create. So those are some of the things there around the meaningful pieces and helping the CEO and leader to connect. And then there might be this other side that I've had to do as well around holding that mirror up and direct communication. And you've got to be courageous as a coach. And maybe this is where you bring in a 360 overview assessment. I work with leaders which often have done staff surveys, and they have to read things that are uncomfortable for them to read and see. I'll stop there, John, and see what your thoughts are on what I'm sharing.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I think working in business, I think that let's say that there's this myth out there that working in business doesn't require personal and professional growth. From again, academia standpoint, business is, not as worthy of like study or attention, right? Like, it's more like, I think there's this, let's call it a slight pervasive thing. And let's say you also have a background in classics, like you literally spent your years studying Latin and ancient Greek, and then you get out into the business world and you realize, whoa, there's this whole element that you are aware of, right? And what I'm seeing now, and the work that I've done as an executive coach, is some of the executives I've worked with are some of the most amazing people I have ever met. And part of it is they have to develop a heart for people, even when people are so uncool. The executives, like in this spaces, have to have a space of not taking it personal, being like, you know what, this is the way this organization is going. Like that's a tremendous asset and skill that that executives have. Some executives haven't yet developed that. And I feel like that's one of the biggest things that holds back the executives I've worked with, is this sort of egoic, like, no, like it's an unwillingness to change, an unwillingness to really move off of that. So if it's incredible too, sometimes these organizations, I mean, they're doing lots of money. Like they're we're talking revenue in the tens of millions a year. And oftentimes when the revenue gets like that, some of the situations and wonkiness just increases too, because you just have these odd dynamics, and I've coached them, I've seen them, and when an executive, when you can really reach them, and it might be as an employee, it might not be your job to do it. It might be your job to, figure out how you can get your executive a coach, or get your executive a consultant or a program or something to do it. And this is where a lot of executive coaches make their money, because the stakes are so high. It's worth $1,000, at least $1,000 an hour. It's worth like so much if the executive can figure this out. So I feel like I'm rambling on a little bit, but it's executives, if there's an incentive and they see the benefit of them changing, they will change.
Yeah. And it makes me think of Marshall Goldsmith's book, isn't it? What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And it's a great read, actually. Great tips in there.
That's what he does. I mean, that's why Marshall makes his money, is because the organization will say, yeah, this person needs to do this, this, this. He gets in there and says, hey, this is what needs to happen. So the person, I mean, and in these positions, it's Marshall telling them, this is what you need to do to change. It's challenging when you are an employee to tell someone, hey, this is what you need to do to change. I think it's the setup itself is really hard. It's really hard.